Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, the state of Clemson football. A conversation that not only Clemson fans are having, but a lot of national college football fans are having as well. It was, not very long ago, Clemson football was the gold standard of the sport of college football. There were a lot of programs that were trying to model what they do after Clemson. Now, you fast forward to the middle of 2024, it looks different. It feels different. I want to talk about kind of where this Clemson program is going, and I want to start by this: the Clemson fans, y'all continue to show a ton of love to the boys, and we normally try to keep it pretty positive, right? We talk about what we like going on with the program, why to be optimistic about this Clemson team. This episode is probably not going to be as much of that because, quite frankly, there are some significant signs and changes that are going on with this Clemson team that it's just pretty clear it's not going in the right direction. Yes, it has to do with the loss at home against Louisville, but I think it largely has to do with what we've seen from this Clemson team over the last year and a half of football. So I want to get into that now for the Clemson fans before we get into one. As always, y'all show a ton of support to the boys. You guys know I love talking about this program. Thank you for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But, much more importantly, would love to hear just some raw reactions from the Clemson fans. I think there's a lot of different opinions you could have, and I think there'll be points where I'm on my little bit of a rant, if you will, that you might disagree with. I think that's what college football is about. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section, whether you agree, whether you disagree. Without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start. Look, we're going to talk about coaching hires. We're going to talk about transfer portal. We're going to talk about what's going on the recruiting trail. But I want to start with what I think is probably the most glaring concern I have for Clemson is the standard feels different. Last year and even this offseason, Dabo Swinney went on and on about defending a 9-4 record, I believe 4-4 in conference play. And he's kind of doing the same thing in 2024. And I guess you could have said at the end of 2023, all right, Clemson's been very good for a very long time. They took a little bit of a down year. That's okay. Well, let's not forget that it wasn't necessarily the standard before 2023, but now you go to 2024, Dabo Swinney's getting up there again and saying, we're sitting at 6-2. I believe that there's not a single win that Clemson has, which is against a top 25 team. And Dabo Swinney's once again getting up there and trying to defend it as if it's okay. And you go back to 6 years ago, it would be completely unacceptable. And Dabo Swinney would tell you that a 6-2 record following a 9-4 record is unacceptable. That's not the standard for Clemson football. My biggest concern is this program feels complacent and the standard feels different. It seems like Dabo Swinney to me is okay with the 6-2 record, kind of trending to be, an average team in the ACC, but not a great team. And he's trying to defend that standard. I think that's the biggest concern. Where you go back 5-6 years ago, the standard was a national championship. The standard certainly was winning an ACC championship, was competing for a national championship, and a college football playoff berth. If you didn't make the college football playoffs, if you didn't compete for a national championship, that was a failed season. It doesn't seem like we're there right now. It seems like Dabo Swinney's completely okay going 9-4, 9-3, and just being a solid team. That's the biggest concern. I think the second concern I want to talk about is coaching hires, coaching staff in general. And I want to start with just the coaching that we saw against Louisville in what was probably the biggest game since Georgia. And this is the two biggest games that we've seen Clemson play where they've played their worst football. And I think, more importantly, they kind of played scared football. Like, what have we talked about throughout the month of September and October about this Clemson offense? One, it was a top 10 scoring offense in the country. It was top 10 in yards per play. The Clemson offense looked freaking awesome over the last couple of weeks. They were pushing the ball vertically down the field. They were being aggressive. Cade seemed calm, comfortable at running this offense. And then all of a sudden you watch that Louisville game and it seems like they reverted back to 2023. It seemed like they were a little bit scared. And I don't know if it was Cade not playing great. I don't know if it was Coach Riley or Coach Swinney being kind of scared of the moment. It just didn't seem like that high-flying Clemson offense that was going to be aggressive, that was pushing the ball down the field like we saw the previous couple of weeks. So I think that's a concern in and of itself is, when the moment's the brightest, are we calling the plays and are we running this program the same way we would if we were up 21 points against Wake Forest? It seemed like this program, starting with the coaching staff, was a little bit of afraid of the moment. I think secondly, coaching hires continues to be a problem. Look, I think Matt Luke was a solid hire. Garrett Riley, I still do like that hire. We liked it back then, and maybe hindsight 2020, it hasn't necessarily fully worked out. The one that is kind of mind-boggling is Wes Goodwin. You look at this Clemson defense right now, and again, this is kind of what Dabo has done at times, where he just kind of promotes from within, is kind of okay keeping it in-house, which just limits the quality candidates that you can bring in. I mean, this is Clemson football. You lose Brent Venables to Oklahoma. There's no reason in the world you can't get one of, if not the best defensive coordinator across the country to come coach this Clemson defense. Dabo Swinney didn't do that. He decided to promote from within. Take a look at this Clemson defense in 2024. Mind you, that there's talent on this football team. A lot of guys that you see on this Clemson roster, specifically on defense, will be playing on Sundays over the next couple of years. They're allowing 24.3 points per game. That's 52 in the country. They're allowing 5.3 yards per play. That's 54th in the country. They're allowing 4.6 yards per carry. That's 88th in the country. That makes me look like an idiot. Prior to the 2024 season, I was getting up here and saying I thought Clemson's front seven was a top 10 unit in the country. They're giving up almost 5 yards per carry outside of the top 80. They're only sacking the quarterback 5.5% of the time. That's 68th. There's not many stats on this Clemson defense that tell you it's even a top 30 defense in the country. The standard for Clemson defense is top 10 in the country, top 5 in the country. We're not even close to that. And I don't think it has to do with that much talent. This team is good on the defensive side of the football. You have multiple guys that will be playing in the NFL over the next couple of years. It's a problem. And Wes Goodwin doesn't seem to be helping that problem. I think lastly, transfer portal recruiting, kind of general roster construction. Let's start with the recruiting trail. That's clearly taken a dip. And I think this is kind of the overall conversation we've had with Dabo, where it's just kind of failing to address and adapt to the modern landscape of college football. We use this term a lot for college football coaches. It applies to pretty much every area of life. Adapt or die. Like, if you don't adapt to a changing landscape in any profession you're in, you ain't going to be very good at your profession for very long. Dabo Swinney continues to not really adapt. And let's start in the transfer portal, just not using it. You're not recruiting to the level out of high school where you can't use the transfer portal as well. I would go back to the 2023 season and say, what if, Clemson went out and got just one impact transfer portal addition? What if Clemson grabbed the Keon Coleman? What does Clemson's record look like in 2023? Because I would guess it's more better than 9-4. If every team around you, Miami, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida State in the ACC, they're all using the transfer portal in big ways, and you're just not. That is, you're handicapping yourself. You're basically just taking out your kneecaps because you can't compete with all these programs doing a lot of things right, and then you're just not going to let yourself use the transfer portal to address some depth concerns and roster concerns that you have. I think the biggest example in 2024 is the edge spot. I mean, the edge position was such a problem for Clemson. They moved Peter Woods, who was a freshman All-American on the inside of the defensive line, moved him to the edge position. I mean, you took your best player on the defensive side, arguably your best player on the defensive side of the football, put him at a different position. And look, we were excited about Peter Woods and what he could do at the edge rusher position. He's a pretty damn good football player, but what does it look like when Peter Woods is not on the football field? It's a problem. I mean, what if Clemson just wanted to say, hey, we don't need to add the best edge rusher in the country, but we wouldn't mind having another piece to rotate in on that defensive line at that edge rusher position. Defense might look a little different. Then you go to the recruiting trail, you look at 2025. Clemson's number 16 in the country with only 14 commitments. If you're going to bring in small classes at the high school ranks and, quite frankly, not the standard, I mean, Clemson used to be recruiting top 10 in the country. you're not recruiting to that extent, and then you're not supplementing that with the transfer portal, your roster just is not going to be as good as some other programs across the country. Where Miami's doing a really good job on the high school recruiting trail, they're also doing a really good job in the transfer portal. I think it overall comes down to two really big things. One, just it doesn't seem like this coaching staff, starting with Dabo Swinney, is adapting to what the new landscape of college football is. And look, if Dabo Swinney has some problems with where college football is going, then maybe it's time to not be the head coach of Clemson football anymore and let a coach that is willing to coach the game and play the game the way you need to take the reins. And I would completely respect the, hey, Dad, you don't want to participate in NIL, you don't want to do the transfer portal. I get it. Maybe it's time to go into the booth and call games for ESPN. I think secondly, and most concerningly, the standard of Clemson football just feels different. And that's the biggest problem I think we're talking about. It seems like this team is okay losing these kind of games and saying, "Hey, look, we're still 6-2." It's not the standard that I mean, I grew up watching like that. That's kind of my memories of college football. Is Clemson at the top of the sport. That should be the standard. I don't know what has changed, but something has changed where Dabo Swinney looks at this Clemson program and said that our standard now is 8-8 national championships. That's probably the biggest concern. That's where it starts. Wanted to hop on and maybe I seemed a little frustrating. It is frustrating to see this program just kind of go in the wrong direction. We'll continue talking Clemson football. We hope to talk them in the transfer portal this year. That would be one thing that really gets me going is, hey, Dabo Swinney, after back-to-back disappointing years, saying, hey, we got to start doing things a little bit different. Adapt or die. You can't be stubborn in this sport. You have to look around you and say, what is the landscape looking like? What do we need to do to get back to where we belong? We'll see if Dabo can do that. Again, Clemson fans, one, appreciate you guys. More importantly, let it fly in the comment section. If y'all disagreed with any part of my rant, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.